My boss just asked me to host his entire family for a week, not a joke. He texted me out of the blue on a random Tuesday afternoon and asked if his wife, toddler, and dog could stay at my house for 7 days in January. And then, like an afterthought, he said he could ask the company to pay for his accommodations if that didn't work. I stared at my phone for a solid minute and then I laughed. I thought it was a prank, but it wasn't. Let me back up. I work for a mid-sized company. The CEO, let's call him Dick because he really is one, runs the place like his personal kingdom. And in that kingdom, there are two kinds of people, the golden children and the workhorses. I am a workhorse. I've been with the company for 8 years. I started out as an assistant coordinator, worked my way up to a management position, and for the past 4 years, I've been a senior manager, or I was until recently. My coworker, Bob, started here about 3 years ago. He was under me at first, and honestly, I didn't pay him much attention. He showed up late, missed meetings, and when he was in the office, he spent half the day with his head on his desk. But Bob had a wife who announced she was becoming a stay-at-home mom after their kid was born, and our CEO Dick thought that was the most admirable thing a man could do. So Dick promoted Bob not once, not twice, but 3 times in 2 years. Bob went from being a junior analyst to my peer, then to a director, and recently to a vice president. That put him above me. He is now my boss's peer. Meanwhile, I haven't gotten a raise in 4 years. And when I had a baby 2 years ago, I got quietly demoted. No official announcement, no change in title on paper, but my responsibilities were stripped away, my team was reassigned, and I was moved to a smaller office. Dick never said a word to me about it directly. He just started giving all the big projects to Bob. So when Bob texted me asking to house his wife and kid and dog for a week, I was gobsmacked. I mean, who does that? He lives across the country now. He moved away a year ago after some family emergency, and Dick promoted him again as soon as he settled. Now Bob is out of sight, out of mind, and apparently thinks I'm his personal concierge. The text said something like, "Hey, we have to come back to the city for a training thing and hotels are expensive. Could your family put up my wife and toddler and the dog for the week? I'll be staying at a hotel near the office. If that doesn't work, I can ask the company to cover my hotel too." Like he was doing me a favor by offering to pay for his own accommodations. I didn't respond. I took a screenshot and sent it to my husband, who said, "Tell him no." But I had a meeting with Dick scheduled for that afternoon and I knew Bob had already talked to him. Dick loves to play puppet master. So I walked into that meeting with my blood pressure already spiking, and sure enough, 30 seconds in, Dick says, "So Bob mentioned you were going to help out with his family? That's really great of you, shows team spirit." I didn't scream, I wanted to. I sat there with my hands in my lap and said, "Actually, I haven't agreed to anything. I was going to discuss it with my husband first." Dick waved his hand like it was a done deal. "Well, it's already approved from my end. Bob's a valuable asset and we need him focused for that training, you understand?" I understood perfectly. I understood that I was being used as free labor. I understood that my time, my home, my family's privacy meant nothing. I excused myself and went back to my office. I closed the door and called my husband. He said, "Hell no, we're not hosting strangers. Our kid is 2 years old. We don't have a yard for a dog. We don't have the space, and you're not going to be their servant." He was right, so I drafted an email to Bob. I kept it professional. I said, "Unfortunately, we are unable to accommodate due to family circumstances." I hit send. That was yesterday. Today I got called into HR, not because I said no, because Bob complained that I was being uncooperative and that my refusal was causing a logistical nightmare. The HR lady, who I've known for years, looked at me with sympathy and said, "I just have to document everything. Is there anything else you want to add?" I told her the whole story, the demotion after my baby, the lack of raises, the constant favoritism. She nodded and said, "I'll note it. But we both know nothing will happen. Dick runs the show. Bob is his golden boy, and I'm just the one who had the audacity to have a baby while still doing my job." I've started updating my resume. I'm looking for other jobs, but I'm also not going to just roll over. I have a meeting next week with Dick's boss, who actually seems decent. I'm going to ask for a direct conversation about my career path, but I'm not holding my breath. The whole thing has me thinking about how many women I know who have similar stories, how many of us get pushed aside while the men who schmooze and get promoted for having families get everything. Bob has been praised for being such a good dad while I was punished for becoming a mom. And now he feels entitled to ask me to host his family. The audacity is mind-boggling. I should probably mention that I am a woman of color and Bob is white. I don't want to pull the race card, but I've been at this company long enough to see the pattern. The golden children all look the same, and the workhorses all look like me, so that's where I am. I've said no, I'm job hunting. And I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because Dick doesn't forget when you don't fall in line, and Bob definitely doesn't like being told no. The next day, I got an email from Bob. He CC'd Dick and HR. It said, "I understand your decision, but I would have appreciated more notice. We've now had to scramble to find alternative arrangements. In the future, please communicate earlier if you are unable to assist." Assist, like it was part of my job description. I didn't reply, I just forwarded it to my personal email. My husband said, "You should go to HR again, this is hostile." But I've been to HR, they document, they don't act, so I'm taking action myself. I'm sending out applications tonight. I have a call with a recruiter tomorrow morning. I don't know if I'm overreacting. Maybe I am, but something in my gut tells me this is just the beginning. Bob and Dick are not done with me, and I need to get out before this job breaks me. I never thought I'd be the one to catch my husband cheating with his ex-wife at our son's birthday party, but that's exactly what happened. Let me back up. I'm 27, my husband Peter is 37. We've been married for 3 years, together for 6. He was married to a woman named Allison before we met. They divorced a year before we started dating. I knew he was bisexual, and I was fine with it. Allison was never a threat to me, or so I thought. We had a son, Jack, who's 7. We adopted him after we got married, and he's my whole world. Peter's family, though, they're a different story. They're homophobic as hell. They've never accepted our marriage. Every holiday, every family gathering, his mom would pull him aside and say, "You should go back to Allison. She was a good wife. This is just a phase." Peter never shut it down hard enough for my liking, but I trusted him. In came Jack's birthday party. We went to Peter's hometown for it because his parents insisted. They wanted to see Jack open presents. I was hesitant, but Peter said it would be fine. So we drove 4 hours, checked into a hotel, and showed up at his parents' house on Saturday afternoon. The house was packed with cousins, aunts, uncles, his side of the family. Jack was thrilled. I was on edge but determined to make it a good day. Halfway through the party, I noticed his mother was on her phone a lot. Then she went to the front door and let someone in. It was Allison. She walked in with a gift bag and a bright smile. My stomach dropped. I looked at Peter and he just shrugged like he had no idea. I wanted to scream, but I saw Jack run up to his cousins for a game of tag. I couldn't ruin his birthday, so I stayed quiet. I spent the next hour playing with Jack, helping him with his cake, laughing at the balloons. I pretended Allison wasn't there. Then it was time to cut the cake. His mom called everyone to the kitchen. I looked around for Peter and Allison. They weren't there. I told Jack I'd be right back and went looking. I checked the living room, the backyard, the garage, nothing. Then I went upstairs. I passed Peter's old bedroom. The door was cracked open. I pushed it open a few inches. They were both half undressed. Peter was pulling off his shirt. Allison was unbuttoning her jeans. They were kissing, not a friendly peck, a full-on hungry kiss. I stood there for maybe 3 seconds. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just turned around, walked back down the stairs, and went to the kitchen. I helped cut the cake. I sang happy birthday. I handed Jack his presents. I smiled until my face hurt. After the party wound down, people started leaving. Peter and Allison finally came downstairs. Peter pulled me aside into the empty garage. He looked pissed. He said, "Why did you cut the cake without me? That was disrespectful to my mother." I looked at him and said, "I'm sorry, I just thought you'd be too busy getting into your ex-wife's pants." He went pale, dead quiet. I didn't give him a chance to respond. I walked back inside, got Jack, and drove us to the hotel. That night after Jack fell asleep, I sat on the hotel bed and stared at the wall. Peter called my phone 16 times. I ignored everyone. Then he texted, "It's not what you think, she just needed to talk. I was helping her with something." I texted back, "I saw you taking off your clothes. Don't ever contact me again." The next morning, I drove Jack and myself back home. I called my sister and told her everything. She said, "You need to get a lawyer." So I did. I filed for divorce 6 days later. Peter's been blowing up my email, my family's phones. His mother even called me and said I was being dramatic, that Allison and Peter were just reconnecting, and it didn't mean anything. I hung up. Now it's been 3 months. I have full custody of Jack. Peter gets supervised visitation because of a clause I got the lawyer to add about emotional harm. He's still fighting it. Allison has been sending me Facebook messages calling me a homewrecker. Because apparently cheating on your spouse with their ex-wife is my fault. I'm still a mess. Some days I can't get out of bed, but I've got Jack, and I'll never let anyone else dictate what my family looks like. That story is still raw, but another one I read recently hit close to home. It's about a different kind of betrayal, workplace betrayal. My coworker took video of me outside of work to try to prove I'm not disabled. I have chronic pain. It's a real condition, diagnosed and documented. I can function most days, but there are bad days when I have to use a cane. I have a handicap placard for my car. I've submitted all the paperwork to HR. My boss, Amy, is great, but there's this other assistant coordinator, Casey. She's been gunning for a promotion for years. I'm in the same position as her, but I'm part-time because I also have a full-time job elsewhere. Casey thinks I'm wasting the spot. So last month, I had a really rough day. Pain level was an 8 out of 10. I used my cane to walk into the grocery store. I was moving slow, leaning on a cart. I got my groceries and went home. The next day, Casey calls me into the break room and pulls out her phone. She shows me a video of myself in the parking lot. She filmed me from across the street. "I'm limping, I'm using my cane," she says, "so you can walk just fine when you want to, but at work you're always asking for accommodations. This is going to the CEO." I told her, "That's me on a bad day. That video proves I'm disabled, not that I'm faking." She didn't listen. She sent it to HR with a complaint. I had to have my doctor write a letter explaining my condition. Amy backed me up. HR said Casey violated privacy policies and gave her a warning, but now everyone in the office looks at me side-eyed. Casey still works there. She doesn't talk to me anymore, but she leaves sticky notes on my desk with passive-aggressive messages like, "Hope you're feeling better today," with a wink emoji. I talked to a lawyer. They said I have a case for disability harassment, but it'll be messy. I don't know if I have the energy. I just want to do my job and not be filmed like a zoo animal, but I'm also not leaving. I won't let her win that easy. So here I am, two stories, two kinds of betrayal, one from the person I loved most. One from someone I barely knew, both left me wondering who I can trust. But the one that still keeps me up at night is what happened at work. My boss actually asked me to host his entire family for a week, his wife, toddler, and dog in my house, and he didn't even ask, he hinted at it like I should be grateful. Let me set the scene. I work for a company where there's a golden boy, let's call him Bob. The CEO, who I call Dick because he is one, absolutely worships Bob. Bob had a kid, his wife became a SAHM, and Dick promoted him for being a family man. Meanwhile, I had a baby a few years ago, took no extra time off, didn't miss a single deadline, and I got silently demoted. My job title changed, my responsibilities were stripped, but my pay stayed the same. No raise in 4 years. And Dick started treating me like the office mother, bring coffee, take notes, be nice. Bob used to be under me, I was his supervisor. Then he got a promotion after a family emergency that required moving across the country. Another promotion 6 months later. Now he outranks me by 2 levels. And he texts me out of the blue on a Tuesday afternoon. Hey, my wife, toddler, and dog need a place to stay for a week in January. Can they crash at your place? If not, I can ask the company to pay for a hotel, but it'd be easier if you helped out. I stared at that message for a solid 5 minutes. He didn't say please. He didn't ask if it was okay. He just assumed I'd say yes. And he had the audacity to mention the company paying for accommodations as an afterthought, like that would make it better. I have a 2-bedroom apartment, I have a cat who hates dogs, I have a life, and he knows I'm single. Husband left me 2 years ago because he said I work too much, so Bob assumed I had nothing better to do than host his family. I didn't reply, I just forwarded the text to my personal email and took a screenshot. Then came the meeting with Dick. I knew he'd bring it up. Bob had already gone to him, playing the martyr. I'm just trying to save the company money by asking a colleague to host. No big deal, but she didn't even respond. So Dick calls me into his office, closes the door, and says, I heard you didn't reply to Bob's request. That's not how we do things here. We're a family, we help each other. I said, with all due respect, I'm not hosting anyone, I have my own life. Dick leaned back in his chair, gave me this look like I was being unreasonable. You know, Bob's been going through a lot, his wife is stressed, the toddler needs stability, and you have extra space, it's just a week. I don't have extra space, I said. I have a home and my cat doesn't like dogs. He waved his hand. Just think about it, we'll revisit next week. I walked out of that meeting and went straight to HR. I documented everything, the text, the meeting, the silent demotion, the 4 years without a raise, the way Dick treats me like a mother instead of a colleague. The HR rep nodded, took notes, and said, we'll look into it. That was 3 weeks ago, I haven't heard a word back. Meanwhile, Bob sent me another text last Friday. Hey, just checking in, dog is house-trained, wife is easygoing, let me know if you can do it. I'd really appreciate it. I didn't reply, I changed my phone number, but the worst part, Dick scheduled another meeting for this Wednesday. My husband, well, my ex-husband, said I should record it. I told him I can't because it's a one-party consent state, but the company policy bans recordings. He said, then bring a witness. So I asked my colleague Amy, the one who's been my ally, to come with me. She agreed. I've been updating my resume. I have 2 interviews next week. I don't care about burning bridges anymore. This place is toxic, and I'm not going to let Bob and Dick gaslight me into being their unpaid innkeeper. The thing is, I thought I was overreacting at first. Maybe I was being dramatic, but then I remembered that day in the break room when Casey pulled out her phone and showed me that video. She filmed me at the grocery store limping with my cane. She said she was going to prove I wasn't disabled. And HR gave her a warning. She still works there. She leaves sticky notes on my desk with little smiley faces. I have to see her every day, so no, I'm not overreacting. This is a pattern, and I'm done. That's where I am right now. 3 stories all about people who didn't think I deserved basic respect. The husband who cheated at our son's birthday party. The coworker who filmed my disability. The boss who wanted me to host his family. It's like the universe is testing me, but I'm not breaking. I have a lawyer for the disability harassment case. I have a divorce lawyer for the custody battle, and I have a recruiter calling me tomorrow morning. I'm taking control back. If you're going through something similar, trust your gut. Don't let anyone tell you you're overreacting. You're not, and don't be afraid to say no. It's a complete sentence. I'm learning that slowly. But let me tell you the rest of the boss story because it got worse before it got better. Dick scheduled that meeting for Wednesday at 2 p.m. I walked in with Amy, my coworker and backup. Dick looked surprised to see her, but he didn't say anything. He just closed the door and sat down, folded his hands like he was about to give a sermon. Bob came to me again, Dick said. His wife is really stressed. The toddler is having separation anxiety. They were counting on you. And you haven't responded. That's not professional. I said, I told you I'm not hosting anyone. My home is not a hotel. Dick sighed like I was the unreasonable one. You know, Bob's been under a lot of pressure. He just got promoted. He's trying to balance work and family. And you, he paused, looked at Amy, then back at me. You have no kids at home anymore, right? Your son is grown, so you have the space. I almost laughed. My son is 7. I adopted him 2 years ago with my husband, my soon-to-be ex-husband who cheated on me at his own son's birthday party. But Dick didn't know that. He never asked about my life. He just assumes. No, I said, I don't have space. And even if I did, I wouldn't host Bob's family. This is a work relationship, not a personal favor. He can ask the company to pay for a hotel. That's what the budget is for. Amy spoke up. Sir, this is really a personal request. It's not appropriate to pressure an employee into housing another employee's family. Dick shot her a look. I'm not pressuring anyone, I'm asking, but in this company we help each other. That's the culture. And if someone doesn't fit the culture, maybe they should consider if this is the right place for them. That was a threat, plain and simple. I felt my face go hot, but I didn't scream. I just nodded, stood up, and said, I'll keep that in mind. I walked out. Amy followed. She looked shaken. She said, that was messed up. You should talk to HR again. I did. I went to HR the next day, but this time I brought a written statement detailing everything: the text, the meeting, the threat. The HR rep, a woman named Lisa, read it and said, this is concerning, but I need to remind you that our company has a policy against recording conversations, and without evidence, it's your word against Dick's. I said, then what am I supposed to do? She said, I'll talk to Dick. But honestly, you might want to start looking for other opportunities. I'm not saying you should quit, but if you feel uncomfortable, that's a valid reason to leave. I left her office and called my mom. She's the one who told me to get a lawyer, so I did. I met with an employment attorney 2 days later. She said I might have a case for retaliation and hostile work environment, but it would depend on whether I could prove Dick's threat was tied to my refusal to host Bob's family. She said, document everything, save every email, take notes after every conversation, and don't sign anything without reading it first. That was 3 days ago. Yesterday, Bob sent me another text. This time, he didn't ask. He just said, I told the company you're handling the accommodations. Please confirm so I can book flights. I didn't respond. I forwarded it to my lawyer. She said, this is textbook. He's trying to create a paper trail to make it look like you agreed. Don't reply. So I didn't, but today I got an email from Dick's assistant. The subject line was meeting tomorrow, rescheduling of accommodations. I haven't opened it yet. I'm typing this at my desk, trying to calm down before I go in. I don't know what they're going to say, but I've already packed up my personal items in my bag. If they try to force me out, I'm leaving with my head held high. And that brings me to the other story I need to get off my chest. The one with Casey in the video, because she didn't stop after the warning. Last week, I found a new sticky note on my desk. It said, hope your pain is better today. The weather is nice. Maybe you can go for a run, with a smiley face. I crumpled it up and threw it away. But then another one appeared the next day. You forgot your cane at your desk. Is that because you don't need it? And another, saw you walking fast today. Guess you're cured. I started keeping them all in a folder. I have 14 notes now. I showed them to my lawyer, who said, this is clear harassment. We can file a complaint with the EEOC. So we did. But here's the thing, no one tells you about being disabled and fighting for your rights. It's exhausting. I'm already in pain every day. And now I have to prove I'm in pain. I have to justify my existence to people who don't want to see. Casey filmed me on one of my worst days, and she's still the one making me feel like I'm the problem. I had a breakdown in the bathroom at work last Friday. I locked the stall and just cried silently. I didn't want anyone to hear, but Amy walked in, saw my shoes under the door, and whispered, are you okay? I said no. She slid a tissue under the door. That's the kind of ally everyone needs. I'm still here. I'm still fighting. But I'm also planning my exit. I have 2 interviews next week, one at a nonprofit that focuses on disability advocacy and one at a small tech company that actually has a remote work policy. I told my mom about them. She said, you're going to be fine. You're stronger than you think. I hope she's right. Because right now I feel like I'm barely holding it together. But I keep coming back to that moment at the birthday party when I stood in Peter's old bedroom and watched them undressing each other. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just turned around and went back to the party, cut the cake, smiled at my son while he opened his presents. And then I took him back to the hotel and put him to bed, and only then did I let myself break. Peter called me 12 times that night. I didn't answer. He showed up at the hotel lobby the next morning with his mother, who started crying and saying Allison was just a friend. I was overreacting. I was tearing the family apart. I looked at Peter and said, are you going to let your mother speak for you? He said, it wasn't what it looked like. I said, so you weren't taking off her clothes in your childhood bedroom while our son was waiting for cake? He didn't answer. I filed for divorce 3 days later. I got custody of Jack because Peter didn't fight it. He said he needed space to figure things out. That was 6 months ago. I haven't spoken to him since, but his family still calls me. His mother leaves voicemails saying I'm a cruel, jealous person. She says I'm keeping Jack from his father. She says Peter and Allison are just friends now. I delete them without listening. The last time I saw Peter was in court. He looked tired. He didn't look at me. The judge asked if he wanted visitation rights, and he said, not right now. So the judge gave me full custody. I walked out of that courtroom and felt nothing, just empty. Jack is doing okay. He doesn't ask about his dad much. He's more interested in soccer and Pokemon. I signed him up for therapy just in case. The therapist says he's resilient. I hope so. I think that's the hardest part of all this, watching your child handle the mess you didn't make. He didn't do anything wrong. He just got caught in the crossfire. So yeah, I have 3 battles right now: the divorce, the disability harassment, the toxic workplace, and I'm fighting all of them at once. But I'm not going to quit. Not until I've exhausted every option. Because I've learned that the moment you stop fighting, they win. And I refuse to let Bob, Dick, Casey, or Peter win. I'm still here, I'm still standing, and I'm still saying no. I walked into that meeting with Dick's assistant the next morning. My hands were shaking, but I kept them under the desk. The room was the same conference room where I'd been demoted a year ago. Same gray walls, same fake plant in the corner. Dick wasn't there. Instead, it was Bob's new boss, a woman named Patricia who I barely knew. She smiled and said, "We just need to clarify the accommodation situation. Bob's family is arriving Sunday." I said, "I never agreed to host them." She looked at her notes. "Your name was listed as the point of contact for housing." "No," I said. "I said no in writing to Bob, to Dick, to HR." She frowned. "Well, the company has already booked the flights based on your confirmation. We need you to follow through." I stood up. "Then you need to unbook them. I'm not doing it." She started talking about team culture, about how Bob had been through a tough move, about how the CEO expected everyone to step up. I listened for 30 seconds, then I walked out. I went straight to my desk and sent an email to my lawyer. "They're trying to force me. What do I do?" She called back within an hour. "Send me the email chain and don't respond to anything else. I'm filing a complaint with the EEOC tomorrow." That was Thursday. Friday morning, I came in and found a pink slip on my desk, effective immediately. Reason: failure to comply with reasonable management directives. Amy caught me in the hallway. Her eyes were red. She said, "I'm so sorry. I tried to stop it. They said it was final." I didn't cry. I just packed my box and walked out. I emailed my lawyer the termination notice. She said, "This is retaliation. We have a strong case. But it's going to take months. Do you have savings?" I said yes, barely. I started applying for jobs that night, and then Casey found out I was fired. She sent me a text that same evening. "Heard you got let go. Must be nice to have all that free time to email HR about me. Hope your pain meds are stocked up." I didn't reply. I took a screenshot and forwarded it to my lawyer. The next week, I was at the grocery store when I saw Casey's car pull into the parking lot. I ducked behind an end cap, but she saw me. She got out, walked right up to me and said, "I have more video, from the other day. You were walking just fine. I'm thinking of sending it to the local news. Expose the fraud." I said, "I have a disability. It doesn't mean I can't walk on a good day, and I have a stack of doctor's notes dating back 5 years. She laughed. "We'll see what the public thinks." My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my cart. She walked away. I stood there for 5 minutes, then called my mom. She said, "Get a restraining order." I did. I went to the police station that afternoon. The officer at the desk listened, then said, "Ma'am, this is a workplace dispute. It doesn't qualify for a restraining order unless she threatens you physically. Has she done that?" "No," I said, "but she's stalking me. She filmed me outside my home." "We need more than that," he said. "Come back if she threatens you." I left feeling like I was the one being punished. My lawyer said the EEOC complaint would take 6 to 8 weeks to process. In the meantime, Casey kept posting on her Instagram. I know because a friend sent me screenshots with captions like, "When you work twice as hard as the fakers," and "disabled my ass." I deleted all social media after that. I couldn't take it, but the hardest day came 2 weeks later. I was sitting in my living room applying for jobs when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered anyway. It was Peter's mother. She said, "I'm calling to tell you that Allison is pregnant. She and Peter are getting back together, so you can stop playing the victim." I didn't say anything. I just hung up. Then I sat there staring at the wall, and I thought about that moment at the birthday party. The way Peter's hands were on her waist. The way she looked at him like he was hers. And now she was carrying his child, our son's half-sibling. I called my therapist. She got me in the next day. I spent the whole session crying. She said, "You're allowed to be angry, you're allowed to grieve, but you're also allowed to move on." I'm trying. I really am. I found out last week that Peter filed for joint custody, not because he wants to be a father, but because his mother is pressuring him. His lawyer sent mine a proposal every other weekend. I said no, I have full custody, and he abandoned his son for 6 months. I'm not letting him waltz back in now. My lawyer said it could go to court. I said let it. So now I'm juggling 3 legal battles: the EEOC, the custody, and the termination dispute. Some days I wake up and I can't get out of bed. The chronic pain is worse than ever, but I get up anyway. I make Jack his breakfast. I take him to school. I come home and send emails and fill out applications and cry in the shower. Last night Jack asked me, "Mom, is Daddy coming to my soccer game?" I said, "No, baby, but I'll be there, front row." He hugged me and said, "That's okay. You're enough, and that's what I hold on to. I'm enough. Even when my boss fires me, even when my coworker mocks me, even when my ex-husband moves on. I'm still here, I'm still standing, and I'm still saying no. But that doesn't mean the fight is over, not by a long shot." The morning after Jack told me I was enough, I woke up at 4 in the morning with my back screaming. The chronic pain was at an 8. I couldn't get out of bed for 20 minutes. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about Casey's Instagram posts. My friend had sent me another one the night before. It was a picture of Casey at a coffee shop with the caption, "Some people use disability as a personality trait. I use integrity." She tagged the company. She didn't tag me, but everyone knew who she was talking about. I rolled over and grabbed my phone. I called my lawyer's office at 7. The receptionist said, "She's in a deposition. Can she call you back?" I said, "I need to know if I can sue Casey personally for defamation." She said, "I'll put it in the notes." I hung up and stared at the wall. My mom called at 8. She said, "Did you see what that woman posted?" I said, "Yes." She said, "I'm coming over." I'm making you breakfast. She showed up with eggs and bacon and a stern look. She sat me down at the kitchen table and said, you cannot let this break you. You have a son, you have a future, you have a case. I said, I know, she said, then eat. I ate. I took Jack to school. I came home and spent 3 hours rewriting my resume. I sent out 17 applications. I got 1 automated rejection by noon. I didn't let myself cry. I just opened another tab and kept going. At 2 in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was the police department. The officer on the line said, Ma'am, we received a report from your coworker Casey alleging that you've been harassing her online. She says you've been posting defamatory comments on her Instagram. I said, that's a lie. I deleted all social media. I haven't posted anything. He said, she provided screenshots of comments from an account with your name. I said, that's not me. I can prove I'm not on Instagram anymore. He said, we'll need you to come in and make a statement. Bring any evidence you have. I drove to the station. I brought my phone, my laptop, and screenshots of my account deletion confirmation. The officer at the desk took my statement. He was the same guy from before, the one who told me to come back if she threatened me physically. He looked at my evidence and said, this looks like a civil matter. You should get a lawyer. I said, I already have one. She's handling the EEOC complaint. This is retaliation. He shrugged. We'll note it, but unless she makes a direct threat, there's nothing we can do. I left the station feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. I sat in my car and called my lawyer again. She picked up this time. I told her what happened. She said, this is classic escalation. She's trying to flip the narrative. Don't engage. Let me handle it. I'll send her a cease and desist tomorrow. I said, she's not going to stop. She said, then we'll take her to court for harassment, but it's going to take time. That was the one thing I didn't have. My savings were draining, my job applications were going nowhere, and every day I woke up in pain. The next week, I got a letter from the EEOC. They said they were opening an investigation into my termination. They had scheduled a mediation session for the following month. I felt a sliver of hope. Then I got another letter from Peter's lawyer. They were requesting a temporary custody hearing. Peter wanted visitation. His mother had filed an affidavit saying I was unstable and unfit due to my chronic illness and emotional volatility. I read that affidavit 3 times, then I called my mom and read it to her. She said, that woman is a liar and we're going to prove it. The custody hearing was set for 2 weeks out. I spent those 2 weeks gathering evidence. I got letters from Jack's therapist. I got letters from my own therapist. I got a letter from Jack's teacher saying he was thriving under my care. I assembled a binder. I printed every text message from Peter where he said he needed space. I printed his mother's voicemails. I printed the screenshots of Peter and Allison at the birthday party. I had a friend take a photo of them going into the bedroom. It was grainy, but it showed them together. The day of the hearing, I wore a navy blue blazer. My mom came with me. Jack was at school. The courtroom was small and cold. Peter sat on the other side of the room with his lawyer. His mother sat next to him, glaring at me. I didn't look at her. The judge asked Peter why he wanted visitation now. Peter said, I want to be a part of my son's life. The judge looked at the timeline. You haven't seen him in 6 months. Why now? Peter's lawyer said, my client has been working on himself. He's ready to re-engage. I spoke. I said, Your Honor, I have full custody. He abandoned his son. He didn't even ask for visitation until his mother pressured him. He's only doing this because he's getting back together with his ex-wife and she's pregnant. He wants to look like a good father for his new family. The judge looked at me. Do you have evidence of that? I handed over the voicemail transcripts. The judge read them, then he looked at Peter. He said, Mr. Peter, you have the right to request visitation, but I need to see a consistent effort. I'm ordering a reunification therapist. You'll need to attend sessions, and until the therapist says otherwise, visitation will be supervised at a center. Peter's mother stood up. This is ridiculous. She's alienating him. The judge pounded his gavel. Ma'am, sit down or I will hold you in contempt. She sat down. The judge signed the order. I walked out of the courtroom with my mom. Peter followed me into the hallway. He said, I'm sorry, I should have fought harder. I said, you should have thought about that before you took off your pants in front of our son's birthday cake. He didn't have an answer. I went home and made Jack his favorite dinner, mac and cheese with cut-up hot dogs. He ate it while telling me about his day. He said, Mom, I hit a home run in gym class. I said, that's my boy. He said, are you sad? I said, no, baby, I'm proud of you. He hugged me. I held him a little longer than usual. That night, I got an email from my lawyer. The EEOC mediation had been scheduled. She said they're offering a settlement. $50,000 in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement and agreeing not to sue. I wrote back, $50,000 is not enough. They fired me for refusing to be a doormat, and I wasn't about to start now. I wrote back to my lawyer, counter offer, $100,000 plus a signed letter of apology from Casey and from Amy. And I want the EEOC findings made public. I'm not signing an NDA on workplace discrimination. She called me 10 minutes later. Are you sure that's a risky move? They might pull the offer entirely. I'm sure I didn't go through 6 months of pain just to hide it. If they want to settle, they need to admit what they did, she sighed. Okay, I'll present it tomorrow. I hung up and stared at the ceiling. Jack was asleep. The house was quiet. My back was at a steady 7. I took 2 ibuprofen and lay on the heating pad. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. You think you're gonna win? You're nothing but a cripple playing victim. I have videos of you walking without a cane. I'll make sure everyone sees them. It was Casey. I knew it was Casey. I didn't respond. I screenshot the message and forwarded it to my lawyer. Then I blocked the number. The next morning, I got a call from the police station, a different officer this time. Ma'am, we received a report from Casey that you've been sending her threatening texts from a burner phone. She filed a restraining order against you. I sat down. That's a lie. I haven't contacted her. I have proof my phone records show I blocked her. She texted me last night from an unknown number. I have the screenshot. We'll need you to come in and show us. I drove to the station. I brought my phone. The officer reviewed the screenshot. He looked at me. This is her number, but it's from a texting app. Could be anyone. It's her. She's been harassing me for months. She got me fired. She's trying to destroy my reputation. He nodded slowly. We'll note it, but without hard evidence, we can't do much. The restraining order hearing is in 2 weeks. You'll need to show up and defend yourself. I went home and cried for the first time in weeks. Not because I was scared, because I was tired, so tired of fighting. I called my mom and told her. She said, you show up, you tell the truth. That's all you can do. The EEOC mediation was scheduled for the following Thursday. I walked into the room with my lawyer. The company sent Amy, Casey, and a corporate attorney. Casey wouldn't look at me. Amy looked like she hadn't slept in days. The mediator was a calm woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Janet. Janet said, let's start with the facts. Ms. My name was terminated after refusing to host her supervisor's family. Is that correct? The corporate attorney spoke up. That's a gross oversimplification. She was let go due to a reduction in force. My lawyer slid a folder across the table. You hired a replacement for her position 2 weeks after termination. That's not a reduction, that's retaliation. The mediation went on for 3 hours. At the end, the company offered $90,000 and a neutral reference letter. No apology, no admission of guilt. My lawyer looked at me. I shook my head. I want an admission. I want Casey to sign a statement that she fabricated the Instagram harassment claims. The corporate attorney said, that's not going to happen. I stood up. Then we'll see you in court. I walked out. My lawyer caught up to me in the parking lot. That was bold. I'm done being silent. If they want to fight, I'll fight. I have nothing left to lose. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of a judge for the restraining order hearing. Casey was there with her own lawyer. She had printed out a bunch of text messages that supposedly came from me, but the timestamps were wrong. The phone numbers didn't match. My lawyer pointed out each inconsistency. The judge asked Casey, do you have any evidence that the defendant sent these messages? Casey stammered. She's been harassing me online for months. Can you show me the messages sent from her known number? Casey's lawyer interrupted. The defendant has been using burner phones. The judge looked at me. Do you own a burner phone? No, Your Honor. I have one phone. It's with my carrier. You can subpoena my call records. The judge nodded. He denied Casey's restraining order. He said, I see no credible evidence that the defendant has harassed the petitioner. This case is dismissed. Casey stormed out of the courtroom. I sat down and let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My mom squeezed my hand. The next week, I got a call from the EEOC. They had completed their investigation. They found reasonable cause that I was terminated due to disability discrimination and retaliation. They offered to take my case to federal court on my behalf. I said yes. 6 months later, I settled for $250,000. The company also agreed to implement disability accommodation training for all managers. Casey was quietly let go. Amy was demoted. I signed an NDA about the settlement amount, but I didn't mind. I had my dignity, I had my son, I had my life back. But that story isn't the only insane work nightmare I've lived through. Let me tell you about the time my boss asked me to host his entire family for a week. I work for a guy we'll call Richard. Everyone calls him Dick because he lives up to the name. I've been at this company for 11 years. I started as an assistant, worked my way up to department head. I never complained, never asked for favors. I just did my job. Then I had a baby, a beautiful little girl, and suddenly I was invisible. Dick promoted a guy named Bob. Bob was the golden boy. Bob had a wife who stayed home with their kid. Dick thought that was admirable. Never mind that Bob showed up late every day, took 2-hour lunches, and often fell asleep at his desk. Dick kept promoting him. Meanwhile, I did the same work I always did, but my title got quietly downgraded. No raise in 4 years, no explanation. A year ago, Bob had a family emergency and moved across the country. Dick promoted him again and again until Bob outranked me. Last December, I got a text from Bob, out of the blue. Hey, I need a favor. My wife, toddler, and dog need a place to stay for a week in January. Can they crash at your place? I'll ask the company to pay for a hotel. If that doesn't work, let me know. I stared at my phone. I read the message 3 times, then I laughed, not a happy laugh, a hollow, I don't believe this laugh. I texted back, you want me to host your family for a week in my home? Bob replied, yeah, it's just easier. We're renovating, you're close to the office, it'll be fine. I didn't answer. I called my husband. You are not going to believe what Bob just asked me. He was quiet for a second, then he said, tell him no, and tell him you're not his assistant. I knew he was right. But I also knew Dick would hear about it, and I knew if I said no, I'd be labeled difficult. The same label I'd been avoiding for 11 years. I went into work the next day. Dick called me into his office. He said, Bob mentioned you might be able to help him out. It would really show team spirit. I said, Dick, I have a 3-year-old. My house is small. I can't host a family of 3 plus a dog for a week. Dick leaned back in his chair. You used to be more flexible. Something snapped. I said, I've been flexible for 11 years. I haven't had a raise in 4. I got demoted for having a baby, and now you want me to house your golden boy's family? No. Dick's face went red. Watch your tone. I'm watching my boundaries, and my boundary is no. I walked out. I thought I'd won. But 2 weeks later, I was called into HR. They said my position was being eliminated, restructuring. They handed me a severance package that was less than what I was owed. I signed it because I didn't have the energy to fight. But I learned something. Saying no costs you, but silence costs you more. I'll never make that mistake again. After I signed that severance, I sat in my car for 10 minutes just staring at the windshield. I had given that company 11 years. 11 years of showing up early, staying late, covering for people, never complaining. And in the end, I was let go because I wouldn't let Bob's wife and toddler and dog move into my house for a week. That was the real reason. They called it restructuring. But 3 weeks later, I saw the job posting for my exact position. Same title, same duties, just a different name on the application portal. I didn't fight it right away. I was too tired. I spent the first month at home just decompressing. My husband kept telling me to lawyer up, but I kept saying I don't have the energy. Then one night I was scrolling LinkedIn and saw that Bob had been promoted again. He was now a senior vice president. He posted about it with a photo of his family at a lake house. The caption said, "Grateful for a company that values family commitment." I almost threw my phone across the room. That's when I called a lawyer. I found one who specialized in workplace retaliation and discrimination. The initial consultation was free. I told her everything, the silent demotion after my maternity leave, the 4 years without a raise, the text from Bob, the meeting with Dick, the termination. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "This is a strong case. They didn't document any performance issues, right?" "No, my reviews were always excellent." "And they replaced you within weeks?" "Yes," she nodded. "We can file with the AAOC and also pursue a wrongful termination suit. But you need to be prepared for a fight." I told her I was ready, but I was not really. The first mediation session was brutal. Dick's lawyer tried to paint me as difficult and uncooperative. They brought up that one time I refused to cover a late shift 3 years ago. They said I had a pattern of insubordination. My lawyer shot back with my performance reviews, the lack of any written warnings, the fact that I was replaced before my severance even ran out. The mediator looked at Dick's lawyer and said, "Your client's actions appear retaliatory." Dick's lawyer offered $30,000. My lawyer said no. I said no. We walked out. That night I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Bob. He said, "Hey, I heard about the lawsuit. Listen, I just want to smooth things over. Can we talk?" I said, "Bob, I don't have anything to say to you." "Come on, it was just a misunderstanding. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Dick is under a lot of pressure. Maybe you can drop this and we can all move on." I said, "You asked me to house your family. That's not a misunderstanding. That's entitlement." He got quiet. Then he said, "You're making a mistake." I hung up and blocked his number. The next week, I found out that Bob had called my former coworkers and told them I was suing because I was bitter about not getting promoted. A few of them reached out to me. Some were supportive. A couple said, "Maybe you should just let it go." I didn't let it go. 6 months later, I settled for $200,000 and a confidentiality agreement. I can't talk about the details, but I can say that Bob left the company about a year after that. I heard through the grapevine that his wife divorced him. I don't know if that's true. I don't really care. But that whole experience taught me something about how workplaces treat women, especially mothers. And it made me think about other ways people get screwed over by the people they trust, like my friend Mark. He told me a story about his husband that still makes my blood boil. Mark and I met at a support group for people dealing with toxic work environments. He was a quiet guy, early 30s, always seemed a little sad. One day after a meeting, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee. We sat down and he started talking. "I was married for 3 years," he said, "to a guy named Peter. He was 10 years older than me. We adopted a son, Jack, who was 4 at the time. I loved that kid like he was my own. I thought we were a family." He took a sip of his coffee. "Peter's family never really accepted me. They're homophobic. They always thought Peter should get back together with his ex-wife, Allison. I knew about her. Peter is bisexual and I never had a problem with that. But his family would not let it go." Mark set down the cup. "Last September was Jack's 7th birthday. We went to Peter's hometown to celebrate with his family. I didn't want to go, but Peter insisted. He said it was important for Jack to know his grandparents. I agreed. The party was at his mother's house. I was helping Jack open presents when I noticed Allison walk in. I froze. I looked at Peter and he just shrugged. His mother had invited her without telling us. I didn't want to ruin Jack's birthday, so I stayed quiet. I spent the next hour playing with Jack and his cousins, but then I noticed Peter and Allison were gone. I asked his mom where they were and she said, "Oh, they probably just stepped out for some air." Something felt wrong. I went inside and checked the kitchen, the living room, the basement. Then I went upstairs. I opened the door to Peter's old bedroom and there they were, both of them taking off each other's clothes. Mark stopped talking. He looked down at the table. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just closed the door and went back downstairs. Jack was cutting the cake. I took the knife from him and helped him finish. We sang Happy Birthday. Peter and Allison came down about 20 minutes later. Peter looked at me and said, "Why did you cut the cake without me?" "That's disrespectful." I stared at him and said, "I'm sorry, I just thought you'd be too busy getting into your ex-wife's pants." He went pale. I took Jack and left. I drove to the hotel, put Jack to bed, and then I sat in the bathroom and cried for an hour. Mark's voice cracked. I confronted Peter the next morning. He said it was a mistake, that Allison had come on to him and he was weak. He begged me to forgive him, but I couldn't. I thought about Jack. I thought about how I'd have to explain to him why I was leaving. I told Peter I wanted a divorce. He said no. He said he'd go to therapy, that he'd cut off his family, that he'd do anything, but I couldn't trust him anymore. We separated. I moved out with Jack. Peter fought for custody, but the court gave me full custody because of the infidelity and his family's homophobic behavior. It took a year, but the divorce was finalized last month. He looked at me. I still love him. That's the worst part. I still love him, but I can't be with someone who would do that to me, especially in his childhood bedroom. At our son's birthday party, I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You did the right thing." "I know," he said, "but it doesn't make it hurt any less." I thought about my own story, about the fight I had to go through just to be treated fairly. And I realized that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you the most, whether it's a boss who sees you as a servant or a husband who betrays you in the worst way possible. The only thing you can do is stand up, walk away, and never look back.